We continue now the top of Daf Samach Beis Amud Aleph and Meseches Avodah Zara. This is Avodah Zarah Daf 62a. This is the beginning of the fifth parak of Meseches Avodah Zara. The Mishnah says, "Hasocher es hapoel." If somebody hires a worker, lasos imo biyayin nesach, in order to work with him with yayin nesach, so scharo aser, so his wages are going to be forbidden. Rashi explains, "Hasocher ovid kochavim shesocher es Yisrael." If an ovid kochavim, this is talking about an idolater who hires a Jew, lasos imo malacha biyayin nesach, to do work with him with yayin nesach, lahariko mikli el kli, to pour it from one vessel to the other vessel, o lahavir chavis mimakom levakom, or to transport a barrel from one place to another place. Uviyayin nesach mamish ko amar. Rashi says we're talking here about real yayin nesach, meaning shenis nasech laavodas kochavim. It was actually poured as a libation to Avoda Zara. Ustam yenon miboin lan beGemara. In terms of general wine of the Ovdei Kochavim, that's going to be a question in the Gemara. And the Mishnah continues, Secharo lasos imo melacha acheres. Let's say the Oved Kochavim hires him to do some other job. Afal pisha amar lo, even though he says to him, Haver li chavis shel yayin nesach mimakom lamakom, he says, transport for me this barrel of wine of yayin nesach from this place to that place. So in that case, Secharo mutter, in that case, his wages are permitted. Rashi explains, Secharo lasos imo melacha acheres. Kol secharo mutter. There, all of his wages are mutter. The afa gav the agra de yoev lo mishom melacha acheres. Even though the wages that he paid might not have been for that particular other melacha. Uve Gemara mefarish la shaper. The Gemara will explain this line in the Mishnah properly. And the Mishnah continues, Hasocher es hachamor. If somebody hires a donkey, lahavi aleh yayin nesach, in order to carry upon it yayin nesach, sechara aser. So there the wages again are prohibited. But sechara leishe valeh, let's say he hires the donkey in order to sit upon it. Afal pi shehiniach ovid kochavim legino aleh, even though the ovid kochavim put his jug of wine upon it, sechara mutter, the wages are permitted. And the Gemara says, "My time is schara aser." Why is it that in the first case of the Mishnah the wages are prohibited? Again, that's where the worker is hired to work with yayin nesach. Ilaim, if you're going to say hoel v'yayin nesach aser b'hana, since yayin nesach is prohibited to get benefit from, so scharo nami aser, so the wages are also forbidden to get benefit from. Hare orla, but what about orla, the fruits of the first 3 years? The kilei hakerem and kilayim, the asurin b'hana, both of those are forbidden b'hana. Utanan, and yet we learned in the Mishnah, and this is a Mishnah in Meseches Kiddushin, Mecharan v'kidesh b'demein, if a person sells them, again talking here about orla, kilei hakerem, things that are asur b'hana, you sell them and you use the money for Kiddushin, Mekudeshes, that is a good Kiddushin. Rashi explains, Mekudeshes, Alma Isurei Hana, you see that by Isurei Hana, Demeyan Mutar, and if you sell the Isurei Hana and you get money, the money is mutter. V'chol shekein schar pula, so, and it should certainly be true, any wages for working with the item. And so the Gemara continues and says, Ella, rather, Hoel v'tofes es dam of kavodas kochavim, rather the reason is, because the money of Avodah Zara takes on the status of Avodah Zara. Rashi explains, Alahoel v'tofes as dam of kavodas kochavim, tekevan denis nasech lavodas kochavim, since you poured this wine as a libation to Avodah Zara, harehi kavodas kochavim, the wine has a status of Avodah Zara, the domel asur, and therefore the money in exchange for the wine is also going to be prohibited. Kedamron, as we said earlier, kol shata mahaya hemen, anything that comes from it, harehu kamo, it has the same status. V'chihechi the dam of asur, and just like we say, the money for the item of Avodah Zara is going to be asur, so the wages of working with the Avodah Zara are going to have the same status, they will also be forbidden. But the Gemara continues and asks, but what about Shvius? What about produce of the Shemitah year? There we say that the Kedusha Shvius, it transfers to the money in that case as well. Utanani, yet we learned in the Mishnah Meseches Shvius. Ha'omer lepoel, if somebody says to a worker, Heilach dinar zeh, take this dinar, lakot li bo yerek hayom, and collect for me with it yerek, a vegetable today, secharo aser. So then we say that the wages are aser. However, in a standard case of a worker, he simply says to him, lakot li yerek hayom, collect for me the yerek today, so secharo mutter. So then the wages actually are mutter, meaning to say, even in a situation of something which is tofeses as dameh, where we say that the money that's used, let's say, to purchase the item is going to get that status, but that's only true when you're purchasing the item directly. That's not true when it comes to wages. Rashi explains, lakot li bo, if the language uses lakot li bo, lashon mechru, that's like a language of a sale. Demashma lakot li shavi of yerek, that the value of this dinar, that amount of yerek, you should collect for me. So then we say scharo aser. Then we say the wages are aser. L'shoso achar zman habir, meaning it takes on the kedusha shvius. You're not allowed to keep it after the time of the destruction. Elamisbar v'shvius, it has to be destroyed according to the rules of Shemitah. But lakot liyerik, but if he simply says these are your wages to collect from a vegetable, lashon sechira, so that's a language of hiring. V'lo lashon mecher, that's not a language of a sale. Ve'ein lo domim sheyitfesu b'kedusha shvius. There we don't have a situation of money where the kedusha shvius is going to transfer to the money. And again, the point over here is that this idea of tofeses es domel, it doesn't apply to wages. And so the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Rabbi Avo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Avo says that Rabbi Yochanan says, the reason why over here the wages are usher, again, when the person is hired to work with the yayin nesach, kinasu shekonsu chachamim, this is a fine that the chachamim imposed, b'chamorin, with donkey drivers, over yayin nesach, and also with yayin nesach. And the Gemara says, Yain Nesach Hadi Amron. In terms of Yain Nesach, that's the halacha we just said. In other words, it's the halacha of the Mishnah. But Chamorin Mai, what are we talking about when we're referring to the case of the donkey drivers? And the Gemara answers, the Tanya, as we learned in a Braisa, HaChamorin Shayuosin Malacha Bepeiro Shvius. If donkey drivers are doing work with the produce of Shvius, so Secharon Shvius, so their wages have that status of Shvius. And the Gemara asks, Mai Secharon Shvius, what exactly does it mean that their wages are Shvius, that they have the Kedusha Shvius? Ilema di Havinon Luhu Schar Mi Peiro Shvius. If you're going to say that what the Braisa means is that we give them wages from the produce of Shvius, Nimsa Zeh Poreach Chovo Mi Peiro Shvius, it comes out that this person is paying his debt from the produce of Shvius. But the Torah says Liachla, that the Peiro Shvius are for eating, V'lo L'Schora, not for doing business, so that cannot be the meaning. Viela, rather, what does it mean again when it says that the Chamorn who are doing work Bepeiro Shvius, Secharon Shvius? What it means is the Kadosh Secharon B'Kedusha Shvius. Maybe you'll suggest it means that their wages have the holiness of the Kedusha Shvius. That Kedusha transfers to the wages. But the Gemara says Umi Kadosh, but is that really true? Does it really have the Kedusha Shvius? We just said before in the Braisa, the Gemara now brings the Braisa again. V'atanya, but we learned in a Braisa, Ha'omer L'poel Helach Dinar Zel L'kot Li Yerek Bo Hayom. The Bach changes this to Secharo Aser. Again, the idea is that if it seems to be a transaction where you're buying the produce of Shvius, so then we say Scharo Aser, then we say that the wages are Aser. But L'kot Li Yerek Hayom, but if it's just seems to be wages to collect the Yerek for me today, so then Scharo Mutter, so then we say that the wages are Mutter. Again, if it's a simple situation of wages, we don't say that the Kedusha Shvius transfers to the wages. And so the Gemara says, Amar Abaya, Abaya says, Liolam Yahavinon Le Schar Mi Peiro Shvius. Actually, what it means, again, when it says the Chamorin who are doing work with Peiro Shvius, Sechara and Shvius, it's talking about giving them the wages from the produce of Shvius. And that which you asked, that the Peiro Shvius are for eating and not for business, he's able to give it to him in a way that is mutter. Rashi explains, Sad Heter Matnas Chinam, you give it to the person as a gift, and that is a way to work around the issue, and then you can give those Peiro Shvius as payment. Kiritanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Rashi says, Kiritanan Gavi Meiser Sheni, this is a Mishnah by Meiser Sheni. It says, Lo Yomar Adam L'Chaveiro, a person should not say to his friend, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samich Beis Amud Beis.